Hi, today I'm interviewing Bruce McCallum, senior pastor at Shaddai Christian Church. And in fact, Bruce, you married Stephen and myself back 28 years ago, so we go back.
A while back now.
Yeah. And we're going to be talking about burnout and just really how to avoid it. But before we do, I want to ask you, Bruce, just a little bit, how long have you been here? And then maybe one of your favorite things in your ministry. What thing you're most passionate about?
Thanks very much, Elise. It's wonderful to be able to be here, and I do remember that wedding, and it's just been all part of a journey. So that was 28 years ago, which means I've probably been here about 33 years, somewhere, and that's a long time.
Yeah.
And it's been an incredibly rewarding journey. It's a very diverse career. There's lots of variety, and that's probably been the highlight for me. Just all the different aspects. You just never get bored, the ups and the downs, and that's been the pleasure and the joy as part of this journey.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, never a boring moment.
Never a boring moment, no.
Okay, let's get on to the topic of burnout, which I know you experienced, and you can share your personal experience with listeners. And if we look back maybe 6 months before that time, what do you think people would have admired about what you were doing and maybe missed?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. Is that I don't think I showed up in the sort of public spaces in an inauthentic way. I am diligent. I like to work hard, and I think that the way that I was showing up in those spaces was high functioning. Looking back at it now, there were internal signs of what was going on, but I'm not sure how many of those signs were external to that. And I don't think that was necessarily fake or anything like that. It was genuinely who I was. But underneath that, there was some sort of structural issues that started to show up.
Yeah, and that leads into our next question. So what was it? Was it a moment? Was it something physical or internal? What kind of made you realize something's not right here?
No, it just there was this moment of time when I realized something was wrong, and I was up front and I had my notes on the lectern, and I was just battling to concentrate. I was battling to follow them. It felt like I had this brain fog there, and I initially thought it was the light above, something had gone wrong, and I looked up and I saw the lights were absolutely fine, and then afterwards when I went home I realized that something wasn't lacquer there, something wasn't right, and I'd started to recognize that there was this brain fog that I was experiencing, and at times I just wasn't absorbing and concentrating in a correct way. And that's what sort of triggered it, that there was something not here. And then, I don't know, maybe it was a couple of weeks later, I was at a conference, and I was literally just overwhelmed by emotion and just literally just could not hold myself together. And that's what actually just triggered the whole thing. Okay, something needs to happen here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just to jump into my own experience for a second, I after 2 ops in a short space of time and not listening to the doctor, the second one was a bit more invasive, the first one was laparoscopic, my body also said enough, and I had a 2-hour cry session that I couldn't control, which was so I guess
that's the sort of deal. It's just like my body just said, okay, this is enough. This is shutdown time.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing had to be dealt with.
Okay. And then you went to see a doctor, or?
Yeah, I saw the GP originally. I think he recognized what was going on. He referred me to a specialist, firstly to a neurological specialist, and then to other specialists within that. And then ultimately I got the help of a psychologist who helped me identify what was going on and how to rebuild that, which was a very rich time of my life. It was a deep learning, and I only wish that I had got there earlier.
how would you say that can support Christian people? Some people feel like, no, you shouldn't go to a psychologist, and you should just rely on the word or whatever. And yet you found that to be helpful in addition to your faith.
I'm certainly not in the camp of being anti-medicine, anti-medication, anti-psychology or anything like that. I think they all have a role to play. We're holistic. We're body, mind, and soul, and spirit, obviously. And this was a part of my life where there was a part of my psychology at an emotional level which needed to be dealt with, and that's what had come up through this process, and that's what needed to be dealt with. And going to a psychologist, psyche deals with the soul, and that's the area that had become damaged. So for me, it certainly is not an incongruency at all. In fact, I'm extraordinarily grateful for that period. Looking back, of course, I'm extraordinarily grateful for that period of my life and what I learned about myself and how I respond to life.
So practically, what did the psychologist put in as some boundaries to, from in getting better, and resting, and what could you and couldn't you do in that period?
Look, there was a 3-month period where I was not high functioning at all. And the issue, the way it showed up was this very intense brain fog, where you just could not concentrate, just could not engage, and that took a while to dissipate. But the psychology helped it to dissipate there. And the way that it came to help me is that she described it as a house, my life as a house. And it's just one portion of the house that had crumbled. The whole house hadn't crumbled. It was one portion. And it meant in that room where that had happened, that had to be rebuilt. And that was the journey. So the rest of the house stood. It was one space, one thing. She helped me identify that. And then she helped me rebuild that. And as she helped me rebuild that, then slowly the body was able to follow correctly. At no stage in that journey did I feel spiritually, sort of out of sorts or something. You start to understand this thing and the way God created us in a very real way. Is that I was spiritually in a good space. I was physically fit, but I had this space that was impacting my life. And that's what she helped me identify, that, name it, give it a label, and then to rebuild it.
And in the period of recovery, were there practical suggestions that she gave you, like not going on your phone at 12 o'clock at night or something, anything, those sort of practical things that might be helpful for other people, and we can get into that some more.
I mean, it wasn't practical, but the one specialist said to me, the best thing you can do is go to the Karoo for 3 months and just kind of zone out and just rebuild. I don't think that was very practical, but it certainly felt that, and we did go away during that period as well, and some of that was restorative. So the practical parts, they actually came later. Okay. At this stage, a lot of the work that was being done was, seeing the psychologist, then coming back and processing as best that I could. And I filled a whole notebook just processing that stuff. I was determined. I was very engaged in the process. So that was that practical part in that stage. Later on, there came some lifestyle changes that had to go with that, and still are ongoing.
I have a friend who's a psychologist, and she can't help people who don't want to be helped. So I'm sure that psychologist loved that you were just so engaged. Sometimes people just want someone to listen to them moan.
Well, I kind of knew that. From my if a person doesn't want it, firstly, I was diligent. Secondly, I actually started to think this is helpful. This is good. And as I say, never want to go through it again, but incredibly glad for what I gained out of it.
And then I want to come to the topic of Sabbath. So it's interesting because the Old Testament speaks, as was one of the 10 commandments, to take a day. And if you want to talk us through your understanding and how that's transitioned today, and what's practical
wonderful.
Both for people who are spiritual like us, and those maybe that just need to take the idea of it and how it's helpful.
Now here's the interesting thing, which is going to befuddle this whole thing, is that I've always practiced Sabbath, right back from my varsity days, is that I always set aside a day so that didn't spare me from burnout. And that's an interesting point to explore at some point. So I've always had that, and I've always had that practice simply at that point in my life because God commanded it. And therefore I kind of thought, well, he knows best, and let's just do this. So the real question is, how does that work? And then you end up in this space of burnout thing. Well, because there's another part to Sabbath. It's not so much about just taking the day off from there. It's also about switching your brain off. And that was the discipline that I didn't have, is that, I would take the day of rest. So I wouldn't literally work and, I work on a Sunday, so our Sabbath has always been on a Monday. But that didn't necessarily mean I was switching off. And that was part of the skill set that I had to learn. What does it mean to switch your brain off?
I think today people sometimes think that if they're watching Netflix or scrolling on Instagram, they're taking a break, but it's not necessarily.
It's got other factors towards it. I think for me, Elise, one of the most important things that I learned in this process is that busyness is not the issue. Okay, everybody's busy there. Jesus was busy. Jesus was more busy than any of us there. So we make a big deal nowadays about busyness there. But better to be busy than bored, to be frank. I don't think busyness is the issue. The curse is hurry. Because we're busy, but we do it in a hurried way. And when we hurried, all the adrenaline gets going. Everything is tense. Everything is uptight. You can be busy without being hurried. And that was probably one of my earliest lessons here. What does this mean? What does it mean to be busy? Because my life is busy. But what does it mean to do that without being hurried? And that's just been a huge shift for me, is to try and build a life that is busy, but to do it in an unhurried way. When I get that right, it's a sweet spot.
What would a practical example of that be?
A very silly practical example: leave 5 minutes before you go anywhere and drive slowly. Just stop at the stop street, not because you law-abiding or anything like that, just because you can. And so you arrive in places in a better frame of mind. And I just started practicing these really stupid things, not striding it out, not necessarily addressing every beep on my phone, things like that. Actually, I can do this, I can get to that, but I don't have to be hurried in that. Allocating time to preparation where I can enjoy the process. And what it did for me is it just allowed me to feel more energized. I didn't feel this constant sense of, everything is against me kind of deal. And that's been one of the most disciplined things that I've started to value and enjoy a lot. So that's small, silly examples, but life impacting.
Yeah, definitely. I think about shows like Boston Legal and Suits, and they're often in the office at night with the skyline. They're having a whiskey, chatting about the workday long after work hours, and no one's saying, I need to go home to my wife or my kids or my significant other. And it always irritates me. It's something that Hollywood does, but it creates this culture of, or this feeling that to be successful, you need to hustle, you need to be available all the time. So it's not just in service, but it seems to be prevalent throughout.
We've built a society based around hurry. I think we've muddled busyness and hurry, and we created a culture where unless you've got this sort of adrenaline of hurry, you're not going to make that. You can be a success in public and a complete failure in private. And so for me, when I see those sort of scenarios like you've mentioned there, the question that goes across my mind is, I wonder what the private life looks like. What's happening there? Because to be a healthy human being, your home has to be a safe space. You have to have those places where you can come home and just be yourself. If you are not able to ever be yourself, eventually you will end up in burnout, because you become incongruent. Who you are and how you show up becomes different, and eventually that incongruency will cause an internal collapse. So you know, those kind of lifestyles are often linked to unsafe spaces in private, and so people find their identity or their drive or their adrenaline rush in those spaces. And really, if a person wants the healthy dynamic, the more important space is to create what the home space looks like, your family life, that when that is safe and when that is energizing, it makes work different and it makes you more productive. That's what the research shows.
Yeah, yeah. For anyone who recognizes themselves, maybe they think, oof, you know, maybe I do need to slow down or change the rhythms of my life. What a first step, a practical step that someone could take, and then maybe some rhythms and boundaries that you've built into your life too. Yeah.
Sure. I think we don't explore the concept of hope enough. There, hope is the essence of humanity. It's who we are. And one of the earliest signs that you can check your own life against is, what's your hope level like? When your hope level starts to fall, you should address that really, really, really quickly. That's an early sign, and probably the most important sign there. The scripture speaks in Zechariah of being a prisoner of hope. I find that such a rich image. A prisoner, you're locked in. You're almost incarcerated.
You have no other option.
You have no other option. Yeah. And I think that's how we're meant to be. We're meant to be prisoners of hope there. And when that starts to shift, when that starts to think, I think that should be a trigger for all of us. Okay, why is my hope level? What's happening inside me that means that I don't feel hope? Abraham was called a man who hopes against hope. Yes. I just think there's such rich imagery here. And so one of my first keys is, where's my hope level? And as soon as, because look, burnout is also linked with depression there. Depression, this is not an academic definition, but it was a very helpful definition for me. Depression is when you've been strong for too long. And I was strong for too long. I didn't read the signals and I didn't respond to the signals. So the best piece of advice is, watch your hope levels. When your hope levels are dropping, you've been strong for too long. Find out what that is and deal with that.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The second thing is relationships around you. We're created for community. It's not good for us to be alone. And watch those relationships. Are they energizing relationships? Not all relationships are energizing. So find the energizing ones, or cultivate the energizing ones. That's how we're meant to live. And that's what Sabbath really looks like. It's devotion to God, the energizing relationship with God, and it's devotion to people. Surround yourself with the energizing relationships. Those two things were big shifts for me. Then you can do all the other stuff, you've got to create healthy boundaries and what have you, but there's lots written about that. And there's certainly boundaries I had to put in there. But if you wanted to push me on the two things, look for the energizing habits and look for the hope levels.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow. And I could go down so many rabbit holes here because of the book. But finally, I just want to ask you, do you feel that Sabbath is an act of faith, taking a Sabbath, taking that rest, and why?
It is an act of faith. For me, though, Sabbath is an act of trust. It's trust in God. It's saying, if I take this day off, my business isn't going to fall apart. My world isn't going to fall apart. By putting time into seemingly non-productive things there, I'm choosing to trust you, God, with my life there. So, switch your brain off. You don't have to keep working in the back of your head. You can trust God. And that's been also just that shift, because as I said, I've been practicing Sabbath for a long time, but I don't know that I was practicing it with a deep sense of trust. And that was one of the things I shifted as well.
Okay. And then also, just talking about the Sabbath rest and trusting God, that can be a daily practice of, in your quiet time, spending time with God, being able to have a mini Sabbath, even though you might still be working that day, and being able to just trust Him that time that you've taken is, particularly like in my case where I don't have to be at work at a specific time, that you have this time that you can just trust
Yeah.
God and know that.
I think we live in a very anxious world.
Yeah.
And the anxiety is a place where we won't be able to deal with it until we learn what surrender looks like and trust looks like. You can't medicate trust or surrender. Those are deeply spiritual principles that, as we restore the reality of them into our lives, we can deal with some of these deep things in life which are very real. We have reason to be anxious there, but we have a spiritual life which can help us manage that. And when we get that right, it also brings health to the deeper parts of our lives.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I honestly could sit here and talk for hours, but thank you so much. It's been so insightful and helpful, and I'm hoping it helps whoever's out there watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, and it's been a joy.